everyone! April is Autism Acceptance Month, and it also happens to be the month I've been diagnosed with autism. So in this video, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience and the whole process. So just as each of us has a different appearance from the outside, such as different hair texture, different eye color, height, so are our brains unique and different from each other. This is called neurodiversity. So autism is a neurotype. People whose brains are wired in a way that is generally considered to be the norm are called neurotypical, and people whose brains are wired differently are called neurodivergent. There are many different types of neurodivergence, such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and more. So autism presents differently in each person, but is generally characterized by two main traits. One of them is repetitive patterns of behavior, and the second one is difficulty with social communication. So autism can be a disability, but it isn't a disease, it isn't caused by vaccines, and it's not curable. A lot of autistic people, including myself, wouldn't want to change the way we are anyway, and I believe that autistic lives would be much more improved if society would try to find ways to accept and accommodate and understand autism rather than chase after a cause or a cure. So autism is a spectrum, which means every autistic person has a different set of autistic traits and a different experience, and because of that, no single person could accurately represent the entire autistic community. Each experience is unique, different, and valid. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. If I am autistic, how come I found out such an integral part of who I am so late? There are various reasons for that, and here are a few main ones. So, autism research and diagnosis is heavily based on the traits and experiences of white boys. Most medical professionals refuse to work on their misconceptions, misogyny, racism, ableism. They don't have up-to-date education on how to diagnose autism as well as ADHD, and they don't work on making this diagnosis process more accessible to more people. This is a systemic problem that leaves a lot of people to figure it out alone on their own and self-diagnose. Both for my ADHD and for my autism diagnosis, before I could get a professional diagnosis, I had to self-diagnose and do weeks and weeks of research. My first doctor that I saw for my ADHD told me I could not possibly have ADHD because I am not a boy who is hyperactive and I am intelligent. I also think that autism diagnosis is heavily based on how autism looks from the outside to a neurotypical. So another reason for the late diagnosis is masking. Masking is when a neurodivergent or autistic person hides their autistic traits in order to appear more neurotypical. This isn't a manipulative act, and women tend to be better at this than men because there is more misogynistic pressure put on them, and it's even unconscious, it's not manipulative, it's more self-preservational, let's say. So in my uni years, I would go to dance clubs with my friends, even though it would really exhaust me and drive me into sensory overload, and I would drink in order to be able to cope with that. And I thought everyone did that, and I thought it was just the thing to do, even though everyone is uncomfortable doing it. I don't know, I didn't really think about it that much, but I preferred to go to this bar in the same street across the street that was candlelit, calm, with jazz music and a 30s vintage decoration. My friends, however, preferred to go to the noisiest, smelliest, most horrible club of the city, and I just stopped at some point because it just wasn't for me, it wasn't worth it. So masking, as useful as it can be in certain situations such as at work, is also very exhausting and taxing to the person who is masking. Examples of masking can be forcing eye contact, forcing small talk, trying to imitate other people's way of speaking, their gestures, their mimics, forcing yourself to be uncomfortable environments where you risk to get sensory overload, such as noisy, smelly, badly lit places. Forcing yourself to engage in certain traditions, such as kissing people to greet them here in Europe, one thing I hate. But if I don't do it, of course, it's weird. Now, less with COVID, but still. So after finding out I have autism and ADHD, I started noticing little ways I was masking and decided to unmask in certain places and situations where it's safe to do so. But it's very difficult because once you take off the mask, you don't know who you are anymore. I don't know where I end and where the mask begins, and it's quite chaotic. It's a process of self-discovery. There are even parts of me that used to exist that don't exist anymore because I suppressed them. For example, there was the autistic T-Rex arms thing. This is a thing apparently, and I used to do that a lot when I was a kid. So when you walk around with your hands sort of like this, and I've been made fun of because of that, and I just suppressed it. And now even if I want it to come back, it doesn't come back anymore, it's gone. I'm not only trying to bring back parts of me that I suppressed, I'm also trying to enrich the ones that I still have. One of them is stimming. Stimming means self-stimulating behavior. This is a behavior that everyone does, including neurotypicals, but neurodivergent people tend to do it more often. Stimming can be conscious or unconscious, and examples of it include tapping your fingers, shaking your legs, rocking back and forth, side to side. Visual stims like in staring at candlelight, repeating pleasant words called echolalia, like words you like. Stimming is a method of self-regulation. It's an expression of joy, an expression of stress. It is a very healthy thing to do, and I'm in the process of discovering new ways to stim, such as fidget toys or stims I've never tried before. Growing up as a girl, I remember instances where I was told to suppress my stims because it's not ladylike. For example, I liked swinging my legs when I was sitting on a chair. I liked skipping instead of walking. And stims don't really go away, they just build. The process of unmasking makes one look back into the past and find instances of being judged, shamed, isolated, punished for one's natural, harmless autistic traits. This experience made me lose a lot of faith in my own judgment and my own intellectual capacity, especially in the education system. This is a huge failure of society because humanity's most influential figures, the ones who changed the course of history, the artists, the thinkers, the inventors, the composers, were and are mostly neurodivergent. They are the people who, despite society's long existing fear of differences, under the right circumstances, managed to blossom and make wonders and bring that society something valuable. There is Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Sir Isaac Newton, and many, many more. As a result of the education system's disregard for neurodivergence, innumerable children will never get to fulfill their full potential. That being said, neurodivergent people's inherent human value is not acknowledged until, if ever, they bring something of value to society despite all the crap they face. Because society's acceptance and respect of neurodivergent human beings is conditional to the value that they will get from them. Not simply because they are human and sentient and therefore deserving of respect and consideration just like everyone else. The average school is a torturous place for a neurodivergent child in every way. I remember the smelly, noisy, nauseating, chaotic schools with uncomfortable fluorescent lights, and that's been the case for every school that I've been in. Not only that, but the learning needs and pace of a neurodivergent child is never taken into consideration, as well as neither the teachers nor the students have any idea what neurodivergence is and how to accept and accommodate it. On the contrary, it has been my experience that the teachers are usually the first to imitate, mock and bully autistic children and ADHD children. So it comes as no surprise that autistic children who need explicit instructions on how social life works never get the help they need. Although, according to my experience, I wasn't the one who needed most to learn how to behave appropriately. So I want to talk a little bit about my diagnosis process. Basically, I was diagnosed by Instagram and TikTok. One day they decided that I have ADHD, and I started getting bombarded with ADHD related reels and TikToks. And at first I just laughed at it. I was like, oh, well, that sounds a lot like me, haha. And then after a few times, like, it started to hit me, I have that. I decided to get, a few months later, and after a lot of research, I decided to get an official diagnosis. And what happened is, like I said, I first went to a bad doctor, I don't know how else to say it honestly, who told me I can't have ADHD because I am not a boy and I'm not hyperactive. If you don't know, there are 3 subtypes of ADHD, and it's not necessarily only hyperactive people who have ADHD. And so then I went to see another doctor who herself has ADHD, and she easily diagnosed me. So after I got my ADHD diagnosis, I became very interested in the subject of neurodivergence. So I started to make a lot of research, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about autism. So autism and ADHD are commonly comorbid. They have a lot of similarities, and it can be sometimes difficult to differentiate them. And I decided to hear it from the people who lived it, hear it from autistic people. And I went on social media to find educators, advocates, etc. So I wanted to find that, but I quickly realized that it's way more common and it's way easier to find people who are allistics, so not autistic, speaking on behalf of autistic people and completely overshadowing them in the process. The only way I could find the crowd I was looking for, so the actually autistic people, was through the hashtag #actuallyautistic. I really recommend it if you're looking for the same thing as I did. So once I found these educators and advocates speaking for themselves, I quickly related to it. The white boy traits of autism that I could not relate to in the beginning turn into the experiences of a variety of different people, especially women, who were much more relatable to me. And I would like to talk a little bit about some autistic traits that I found in myself. So first of all, I have sensory processing disorder, which is very common with autism. It's basically when you get easily overstimulated from any sensory input. It can be light, sound, a variety of different, like temperature, things like that. So I decided to find ways to reduce that discomfort because it can result in extremely uncomfortable feelings. It can result in meltdowns and emotional reactions. I started to use especially earplugs because I have a very big sound sensitivity, and I found my mood and my energy much improved. My boyfriend could also agree with that. So once I found out that the earplugs work that well, I started carrying them with me everywhere, as well as a pair of sunglasses. I also have a big sensitivity to cold. I hate the cold and it gives me literally pain. I also don't like wearing too many layers of clothing, which results in me not going out that much during the winter. We try to divide our tasks with my boyfriend in an autism-friendly way. And I do most of my shopping online, and when I want to go do groceries with my boyfriend, usually he goes alone, but when I do, we try to go at a time and a place where it's calm and I'm feeling emotionally ready to have all this overload of lights and sounds and people pushing and all of that. Also, our apartment is very minimalist and most of the things in it are either white or neutral colors. This helps prevent visual overwhelm, executive dysfunction, and disorientation. We have less things to lose and less things to organize and less things to clean as well. I've been a minimalist all my life, but it was never about restriction for me. It was more a natural thing, a thing that came naturally for me. And I don't have any problem buying something if I know that it's about my special interest and if I know that I'm going to use it. Which brings me to the fact that I have special interests. This is another one of my traits. So special interests are a fairly common thing in autism. It's a very intense, passionate focus on a project, on a topic, on anything actually. And this isn't just a hobby, it's very intense, and autistic people can have remarkable focus and drive when it comes to their special interest. They can quickly learn so much about it in such a short time. So my current special interests are sewing, languages, and photography, videography. My particular gift is learning languages. If I'm interested in learning a language, I can learn it very quickly by myself. And I speak many languages. My brain finds learning languages very calming, very soothing and fun, and loves and absorbs very quickly structural information such as grammar. So I've always had special interests. My biggest special interest as a child was animals. I loved learning about them, memorizing facts, watching documentaries, and I wanted to become a vet. And even though I really love animals up to this day, this is no longer my special interest because I was bullied as a child by adults for this special interest, and it became unbearable at some point, and I decided to stop pursuing my special interests. So this was very difficult and traumatic for me, and it was followed by a lot of anxiety and depression. It takes a lot for an autistic person, especially a child, to give up on their special interest, because a special interest is like absolute infatuation. It's like falling in love, you know? And I learned after that to not communicate so much to others my special interests and hide it, keep it to myself. And my special interest of animals became replaced by my interest in languages. This didn't cause me so much trouble because it was perceived as an academic achievement rather than something to bully me for. Even today, I absolutely despise it when someone makes fun of another person's special interest and calls them obsessed, etc. I absolutely hate it, and I personally prefer to listen to someone talk to me about their special interest and give me interesting facts with their face lit up and all the passion in their eyes, rather than listen to someone talk to me about the weather and bore me to death. When it comes to repetitive behavior, the trichotillomania that I mentioned before, which is a hair pulling disorder, started after my special interest was gone. And it was very difficult, and I couldn't really control it at that age, but now I can control it way more, but it still is very difficult. So I also have social difficulties, obviously, especially as a child. This was more prominent due to the fact that I didn't know yet how to mask that well. I have difficulty holding eye contact sometimes, but depending on my mood, I can somewhat manage it. I have difficulty understanding social implications. I tend to be very, very direct. I have a very analytical black and white thinking, and I'm very factual, and sometimes I have difficulty understanding why people would get upset about the communication of objective facts. I have difficulty understanding whether or not I will come across as offensive, and I don't mean to, and I have difficulty with small talk and making friends, and I tend to dislike and disregard social obligations. I also have a very good long-term memory and a very bad short-term memory and a short attention span unless it's something I'm interested in and hyper-focused on. I also wasn't a good student due to the fact that I have my own learning style and I learn better on my own. I also have a lot of difficulty prioritizing which part of a textbook is the main part. I tend to misprioritize it all and study for the wrong parts because, like I said, detail-oriented, and what I think is important is usually the exact opposite of what the teacher asks in an exam. So if you ever go to a lesson with me, just study the parts I'm not studying, you're gonna be okay. I'm also very bad at understanding vague instructions because I see just way too many interpretations of the same instructions. So once I started noticing more and more of my autistic traits, I decided to take some tests, and I will link them down below if you're interested, but remember that they're not diagnostic tools. But basically the results said I am off the charts autistic. And then I rode the roller coaster of imposter syndrome. Am I autistic? I am autistic as heck. I am not autistic. I'm taking space that isn't meant for me. This was very difficult, and I still get it, because I've been diagnosed so late, and a lot of other people who are like me go through the same thing. But the people around me all told me that they really think I am autistic and that they have no doubt, which was very kind and helpful of them. So then me and my boyfriend decided that I should get a professional diagnosis and found me a doctor who is pretty well informed and experienced. And then I got diagnosed pretty easily. She asked me a lot of questions about my stims, my special interests, my traits, and my childhood, etc. And I acknowledge that seeing such a well-known and good doctor was a privilege, but at the same time I really didn't want to go through the same thing again like it happened for the ADHD diagnosis, and in the end it is a waste of money to go to 2 doctors instead of 1. So my diagnosis happened about 3 weeks ago, and it has been very healing. I have much more compassion for myself. I accept myself as I am, knowing that I'm autistic, and I have more compassion for myself past and present for the things that I carried within me for all these years, the shame and embarrassment of certain things that I now know weren't my fault. And I have much more confidence and trust within my own judgment and my thinking process, my intellectual capacity. I have a community of people to go to talk to share my experience with and hear their similar experiences, and skip the small talk as well. I also now know that I'm not an alien, which as a child I believed. I thought that when I went to sleep, everyone would go back to their alien forms and have a meeting with their coven. And that was a more confident conclusion I reached, because after a while I started thinking that I'm the alien, whereas back then it was everyone else, not me. So now that I know that I'm autistic, I wouldn't change it for the world, despite the difficulties, despite everything. And for that matter, the difficulties I think aren't inherent to autism, but it's more due to the fact that society still has a long way to go in order to accept and accommodate autism and neurodivergence in general, in order to stop ostracizing people for their differences, instead embracing them and making also the best out of it, because autism is an out-of-the-box brain which can bring a lot to the table as well. If you watched my video until this point, I congratulate you and thank you so much. I hope that you learned something and you could relate, and if you're in your own process of diagnosis, whether it's self-diagnosis or professional diagnosis, I wish you good luck, and I hope that you enjoyed this video, and see you in the next one. Bye!